Thank you, Kelly. And I wanted to start tonight by thanking everyone for attending our meeting. Before we begin discussing any changes proposed as part of the Phase 2 process, I'd like to start by describing the official plan and what it does. The official plan, or OP for short, is a long-range policy document that sets the community's vision and goals for growth and development based on input we receive from the community. It sets out where new housing goes, industry, offices, and shops will be located. It identifies the infrastructure and services needed to support new development, such as roads, water mains, wastewater mains, parks, and schools. It determines when and in what order parts of the community will grow, and it includes community improvement initiatives. Oh, my apologies, I didn't change the slide. The OP is the blueprint for the community, and all works, public works, and bylaws in the city must conform to the official plan. Because the official plan is such a key document, legislation requires that it is reviewed regularly, which we're calling the 5-year review. This is where we are now, reviewing the official plan as part of a 5-year review. It requires, the OP review requires that our plan conforms with provincial plans, such as the Growth Plan for Northern Ontario, has regard to matters of provincial interest as set out within the Planning Act, and is consistent with the provincial policy statement, which was updated in 2020. The 5-year review also allows for integration of local plans, such as the Community Energy and Emissions Plan that my colleagues will speak to more on later. Specifically, Council directed staff to undertake the 5-year review in 2 phases. We're currently in Phase 2 of the 5-year review. Phase 1 was approved and took effect in 2019. The first phase of the OP dealt with a number of important issues such as population, employment, and land use, land supply or the availability of land to support development, housing options, natural heritage, climate change, and local food systems, which speaks to food and food security for our residents. The inclusion of specific policies related to these topics were supported by background studies, community feedback, and consultation with local stakeholders. As mentioned earlier, Phase 1 of the OP was approved by Council in 2018. This was then forwarded to the province as required by legislation and was approved by them and has been in effect since April of 2019. Soon after the approval of Phase 1, Council held a special meeting in June of 2019 to launch Phase 2 of the 5-year review. Phase 2 is focused specifically on the 3 areas that are listed here, being the Transportation Master Plan, the Water Wastewater Master Plan, and Economic Development via the From the Ground Up Plan. And with that, I will pass the presentation to my colleague, Ed.
Thank you, Bailey. As Bailey mentioned, Phase 2 was to focus on those 3 master plans, and this next slide here speaks to the Transportation Master Plan. So the Transportation Master Plan was finalized in 2017, 2018, and it had very specific recommendations regarding the official plan. These are found in Appendix M of the Transportation Master Plan. In general, staff considered the Transportation Master Plan in the draft amendment and updated language to reflect the current state of initiatives. For example, since the Transportation Master Plan came into effect, city's got a new sidewalk priority policy, the rural to urban road conversion criteria, things like the complete streets policy that is in development and perhaps even finalized, and the Transportation Demand Management Plan. The Transportation Master Plan also had short, medium, and long-term project recommendations. Some of those have been updated in our official plan because they've either been completed or the limits of the improvements have been redefined. The Transportation Master Plan also recommended an active transportation network, and that transportation network has been introduced into the official plan on Schedule 9 that you could find on the Over to You site. It's important to note that this network is the starting point for the city's analysis and not necessarily the final projected network. Council had also directed staff to remove the South Bay Road extension from the official plan. So this is known as the Southern University link, or the second access to Laurentian University. So that those portions, per council direction, were removed from the conservation sudbury lands as well as the institutional lands from the city official plan. Staff has added language to reflect that future road access or future options would need to be considered as part of an environmental assessment process. Staff also received direction regarding Montrose Avenue North, so the connection from Grandview to Manley Drive. Staff had also commissioned a traffic impact or transportation analysis regarding different options for Montrose Avenue North. So that study included 3 different scenarios. So Montrose being a development-driven road, so the 3 development scenarios were no connection to Montrose, or sorry, no connection to Manley, a direct connection to Manley, and a meandering connection to Manley. So those study findings are included on the Over to You webpage, and staff also included a draft amendment or draft proposed language as part of the official plan. So that is part of section 11 that you can see in the official plan. Next slide, please, Bailey. Thank you. And during phase 1, as Bailey mentioned, there was the completion of the From the Ground Up Economic Development Plan. Staff considered those recommendations with the staff from Economic Development. A number of changes were made to the official plan specific to community vibrancy. So many of those changes are included in the introduction sections of the official plan. Next slide, please. While we soon after the launch of the phase 2 review, the province has launched a kind of a major policy. So the provincial policy statement is a policy statement issued by the province, and all land use matters have to be consistent with the provincial policy statement. Now, this new provincial policy statement, PPS, I'll keep that short, came into effect May 1st, 2020. Now, staff and council has already been using this document in land use planning advice and also decisions. And for a bit greater context, this new policy was launched as part of the government initiative, which continues on to this day. So more choices, more homes. So a lot of the major policy list there was for housing. There's some changes for climate change, settlement areas, land use compatibility, and some others, but really the thrust was housing and climate change. What we've included as part of the Over to You site is a chart that compares the former policy statement, so the 2014 policy statement, the 2020 policy statement, and then the staff proposed changes. So that document is meant to guide council, but also the public as to exactly where we made changes vis-a-vis the provincial policy statement. Next slide, please, Bailey. Staff is also monitoring what's happening over at the provincial level as legislation changes. We need to kind of ensure that our planning documents are up to date or has considered kind of the local context. These are 2 bills as part of the this same government. So Bill 108, some of that was stopped and some of that was continued into the next bill. So the Bill 197. So for example, some changes to our secondary dwelling unit policies. We made amendments to include tertiary unit policies. So some of those are already into the official plan. And some of what's proposed as part of this amendment is the striking of the Section 37 benefits. So what that is, very quickly in a nutshell, is community benefits. So let's say the community has a zoning bylaw that says that you could only go 6 stories. Through the Section 37 benefits, you could trade a 7th or 8th story for perhaps a community plaza or a plaza that's open to the public and or public art, just as examples. Next slide, please. And I believe at this point, I will transfer it over to my colleague, Melissa.
All right, thanks, Ed. So the Community Energy and Emissions Plan is a long-term plan adopted by Council in March of 2021. The intent of the plan is to reduce carbon emissions and pollution in Greater Sudbury, including a commitment to achieve a net zero emissions by 2050. With respect to the official plan, we completed a section by section review to determine whether the policies of the current plan aligned with the CEEP or whether specific reference should be added to the official plan. This analysis is provided in an appendix, which is available on the Over to You page to the report, so that you can take a look at where alignment already existed or where changes were necessary for the plan. We did note that many sections are already in alignment with the CEEP. In some instances, references to net zero greenhouse gas emissions were added. In other sections, such as heritage and design, references were added to climate resiliency. Taken together, the policies of the official plan help to achieve a number of CEEP goals, including creating compact and complete communities, enhancing transit service to increase transit mode share by 25% to 2050, and achieving 35% active mobility transportation mode share by 2050 as well. Next slide. So as was mentioned earlier, the Water Wastewater Master Plan was one of the key documents that staff took recommendations from to inform changes to the official plan. In general, there was 3 categories of change that were made. The first category pertained to more technical changes, and those were to ensure that terminology that was used in the official plan is current with respect to nomenclature that's used in the industry. So for example, the current official plan refers to water and sewer versus the more current nomenclature that's used, which is water and wastewater. The second change was related to chlorine contact time. Again, this one's a little bit more technical in nature, but it was a requirement of the Ministry of Environment that no connections be allowed on water mains within 1,300 meters of the Wanapitei Water Treatment Plant and the Falconbridge Pump House number 7, which are dedicated to provide chlorine contact time for treatment purposes. The third pertained to the allocation of capacity at draft plan approval stage. So the approach that staff have taken is to include a policy that demonstrates that the city is moving towards a process that includes a review of capacity sooner in the approval process. We're proposing to include a program whereby the city would further investigate ongoing monitoring and allocation of water supply and wastewater capacity, which is consistent with the approach taken through or proposed to be taken through the Water Wastewater Master Plan. Those policies do recognize that there are a number of existing approvals in the city that were granted under the current policy framework where servicing capacity wasn't allocated until the time that a subdivision was registered. The next slide is directly related to the water wastewater policies. Under this category, a new policy framework is proposed related to requests for extensions of draft plan approval. The framework will include an OP policy that will consider extensions that are consistent with the intent and policies of the official plan at the time that the extension request was made, which will give further review to, for example, subdivisions that were approved back perhaps in the 70s or 80s, and as well as to ensure consistency with the intent and policies of applicable provincial legislation at the time of the extension request. Other consideration will be that the extension will not negatively impact the financial stability of the city and ensuring that adequate water and wastewater and community facilities continue to be available at the time of approval. There will be associated process-related changes in addition to the policy changes. So, for example, there will be an updated application form for extension of draft plan approval, as well as a standardized report template, which in fact staff have been using some of the criteria that are proposed as they evaluate applications for extension as they come forward. Additionally, greater emphasis will be placed on the applicant to demonstrate why they haven't proceeded with the development at the time of extension request. If I could get the next slide. So recent reports related to requests for increased service level on seasonal roads, for example, Wilderness Road, and requests for assumption of private roads, for example, Joe Lake Road, have resulted in an identification of a need to update the current policy framework in the official plan. At present, we don't have a real assessment framework for these types of requests, so the draft policy has been proposed, which includes detailed requirements for each of those types of requests. For example, a request to increase the service level of a private road would require that the road be constructed to the current minimum public road standard of the municipality, and that the benefits, both financial and otherwise, of increasing the service level outweigh the municipal costs. So again, this relates directly to Council's recent direction stemming from recent reports that have gone to Council. Additional work which may include the development of a bylaw and a guideline to help provide additional guidance to both Council and to the public. Next slide. So recently, staff presented a similar presentation to what we're presenting tonight to Planning Committee on January 24th. During that meeting, 2 amendments were made to the resolution that provided staff direction to proceed with the public consultation process. The two items were related to housing. The first was to investigate amendments to both the official plan and zoning bylaw that would permit residential uses in institutional zones. And the second is to look at amendments that would permit community housing portfolio development on all municipally owned properties. These 2 resolutions complement our ongoing work related to affordable and attainable housing, including the land banking strategy, which the policy framework related to that was approved in 2020, and further exploration continues with respect to things such as of right zoning for housing, which will review and eliminate barriers to the development of a variety of forms of housing throughout the city. And with that, I think the next slide is back to Bailey.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, thanks, Melissa. In terms of next steps, specifically as it relates to public consultation, we have already circulated our first draft of the Phase 2 amendments to the province for their initial review and feedback, as well as staff have begun the process of engaging with local indigenous communities. And tonight tonight this meeting is the beginning of our community engagement, with ongoing and further engagement expected throughout the year. Our next steps involve summarizing the comments that we received through these consultations, incorporating them into the draft official plan amendment, and presenting them in a final draft to our planning committee. Staff are expecting this to happen after the municipal election later this year. From there, we expect that Council will direct staff to undertake the final rounds of public consultation and hearings in early 2023, with the adoption of the Phase 2 amendment to follow. Once Council adopts the Phase 2 amendment, it then gets forwarded to the province for their review and approval as required by the legislation. How can community members participate? We created an official plan website that contains all of the relevant information, including a draft of the official plan amendment, the supporting background studies, and a link to provide your comments and feedback at our Over to You website. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. If you have any questions or are looking for information, please see our website at greatersudbury.ca/official plan, and the website for feedback is called Over to You, and you can find that at overtoyou.greatersudbury.ca. Thank you again for attending, and staff are going to be remaining available to answer any questions.
Thank you, everyone. Wow, that was a really great presentation. Lots of information there. I'm just going to reiterate something that I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks. So questions should be appropriate questions. Phase 1 of the official plan review focused on growth, settlement, urban structure, local food systems, natural and heritage resources, urban design, and water quality. Phase 2 focuses on water, wastewater, economic development, transportation needs throughout Greater Sudbury. So we really want to focus on those specific topics for your question and answers. Anything else that falls under official plan but isn't in those specific topics, you are welcome to ask those questions on our Over to You website. So it's over2.greatersudbury.ca. And that website, you can pose your questions and we will get back to you in a timely manner on that page. So we're going to reserve that comment area on that website for questions that aren't related to these specific topics. So I do have a couple of questions for our planners. Why do we need an official plan? Let's start with that.
Certainly. That's a great question, so thank you. The official plan, it sets out the guiding principles for how and where our city will grow and change and where we'll invest our resources. So it ensures that the growth that we see is coordinated with all of our municipal services. So it directs the locations of new roads, water mains, wastewater mains, parks, other services like schools and things like that. And it includes the policies that we need that also directly impact the health, the housing, and the financial prospects for all of our residents. So it truly is the guiding document for the growth that we see in our community.
Great, thank you for that. Let's see, what else do we have here? If I submit a specific issue, will it be addressed in phase 2 of the update?
Okay. Oh, I see you have your mic off, Ed. Do you want, I guess I can take a first crack and then you can add if you have anything additional to add. So we are interested in community feedback. Every comment that we receive will be taken into consideration as part of the review. However, as it was mentioned a few times earlier in the presentation, our real focus as part of phase 2 is the policies that are related to transportation master plan, water, wastewater, SEEP, as well as economic development. Many other topics were addressed through phase 1 of the official plan review. And just to comment that the official plan is a direction-seeking document and the policies within reflect that. If your specific concern is operational in nature, such as trash collection, snow plowing, or specific recreational service, we would recommend that you call 311 and they can direct you to the correct department. So again, the work that we do through the official plan is policy related work.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's see what we have here. I prefer to keep my comments off the record. Is that possible?
Yes, I'll begin if anybody else wants to supplement. So anonymous comments will be accepted, but any comments submitted as part of the official plan review will become part of the public record. Now, there is a process. We work with our colleagues and clerks to ensure that privacy is maintained. However, know that should you submit something, it will be part of the public record.
Kelly, you're on mute.
Thank you. It's only been 2 years I've been doing this from home. I keep forgetting. Sorry, Steve is on our chat and he's letting me know there may be some issues with the document online. I think that's what you're saying, Steve, that there's some omissions and some notes, I think. If that's regarding the official plan itself, or I think it's probably the amendment to the official plan. I believe there are some edits going on in there, and so it is not, but we will review it and have a look and see what's going on in there, and we will update that on the website once we have that done. So they're probably just edit marks and easy to replace and fix. So thank you for letting us know about that, Steve. Let's see what else we have. I live on a road that has been identified as a collector on the transportation network schedule. How did the city come to this decision? What does it mean? Who wants that one?
Perhaps I could take a first stab at it. And so again, I'm not a transportation planner by any means, but understanding that similar to what Melissa and Bailey were saying, that the official plan really is kind of the long-term vision, and where we're putting our industrial, our commercial, our residential, and how people are moving through our community, and all of that is coordinated. As part of the transportation master plan update, they took a look at the entire network and to see again movements. Where are people going to work? Where are people going to play? Where are people living? And so based on that and based on layers of legacy, then we establish a hierarchy in our transportation network. So we've got our arterials like LaSalle, and we've got our collectors like Lansing and Montrose, and then from there we've got our local roads that connect people to the collectors and then to the arterials, and then people flow through. How then that works, that we've got policies associated with that, what you can and can't do with those arterials, connections onto also things like rights of way, and those are, and we set those, again, the transportation master plan provides those recommendations. Those are set into the official plan, and then once the official plan is in place, then we've got to update our zoning bylaw. And then what happens there, once building permits are kind of, you want to build in on your lot, then we look at the zoning bylaw, which then needs to conform to the official plan. So all of that is kind of coordinated at the official plan stage. Hopefully not too winded, but or long-winded. And then if anybody else wants to jump in, feel free.
Thanks, Ed. Steve, you are saved by Melissa over here, who has a better understanding of what you mean. So go ahead, Melissa. Can you let Steve know what your answer is there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Steve, I think that your question is referring to the document that you're looking at is likely the draft phase 2 official plan amendment, and that's a very technical document. So it tells us what to delete and what to replace in the official plan. So if you're looking at the Over to You website, we do have a number of additional documents in the document library. And in there, you'll find a document that is entitled Redline Version of the Official Plan. And that is probably, I would say, the more user-friendly document for the public to look at. What you'll find in there is very specifically highlighted in red the areas where we're going to delete text and what it's being proposed to be replaced with. So if you're looking for the most user-friendly, I would suggest perhaps that document would be your go-to document.
Okay, that's much more helpful. Sorry about that, Steve. I hope Melissa answered your question. Let's see, what else do we have? How soon will short-term roadway improvements happen?
Sure. I guess that's a transportation question.
Yeah.
So these are generally identified as 0 to 5 year projects. And again, those are always subject to budget deliberations and things like the 5-year capital plan. So generally, I would say the 5-year window.
Perfect. Thank you, Ed. Let's see. How are the locations of trails chosen? Who gets that one?
I guess, yeah,
Does
go
it
ahead.
matter?
Bailey, did you want to take a crack at that one?
Oh, yeah, certainly. So building on what Ed was talking about earlier, the transportation master plan updates includes all modes of transportation. So that includes active transportations like trails. And part of the master transportation plan includes an active transportation network or routes where we're proposing trails. And there were some guiding principles on the selection of where those trails can be. So are they visible? Are they connected? Are they integrated with our existing network? Are they attractive? Are they varied to offer options for all levels of active transportation users? Are they sustainable? Are they cost effective? So all of these factors were put into place as part of the plan. And then once the draft routes were selected as part of the transportation master plan, they did go out to public consultation, and they included some key stakeholder engagement. So that's how the routes were selected based on the guiding principles and based on feedback.
Great, thanks, Bailey. Let's see, next question. Maybe this is for you too, so stick around. There are trails in the green field behind my house, but I got a letter saying houses are going to be built there. How will the OP protect these trails?
Certainly. So I presume then the question poser is indicating that they got a letter from the city talking about development in the vacant lands behind their home. So the city has a robust network of active transportation options. We include trails in that as well. And this use of the active transportation is being encouraged through policies within our official plan that exists. And it's a really critical piece of how people move around our city. So if development is proposed where existing municipal trails exist, our planning departments, transportation team, and our parks and leisure staff, we all work together with the developer to ensure that a through connection is maintained within the development. So this will take many shapes, including sidewalks, dedicated walkways, or in some instances, it's possible that the trail will be protected in its existing form. What I suspect is occurring, or what I think the person is asking, is that there is development slated on land where they live. And it's really important for us to note that the trails that there are a number of trails throughout the city that are not actually a part of the municipality's active transportation network because they're not on municipal property. So these are trails that have been just naturally created by residents on land that are owned by private residents or companies in the city. So staff, through the development and application process, we will encourage active transportation opportunities and options with the developer, and we will require them to comply with the official plan. However, the routes that aren't identified on the transportation master plan cannot be guaranteed that they will be protected, as alternative routes have already been selected and the specific land has been designated for development. So it's a little bit long-winded, but hopefully that was the answer to the question. And if anyone would like to add, feel free.
No, we're all good with that?
Yep. I would add just a little piece that, as I was saying earlier, the routes that are shown on Schedule 9 are also kind of the basis of future study, right? So staff will be reacting to that, and we'll be building upon which zone in the proposed schedule.
Great. Our next question, how can we prioritize building and rebuilding existing areas and incentives for multi-residential?
So I can perhaps start on that, and then maybe if anybody else has anything to add, they can jump in. So in addition, we do have economic development policies in the official plan, but in addition to that, Planning Services Division, we have a number of community improvement plans. So we have a downtown community improvement plan as well. We have a town center community improvement plan that covers some of the outlying communities, for example, the Notre Dame corridor, Chelmsford, Kathleen Street, various areas where there are existing commercial buildings that are in need of improvement. And we do provide funding incentives for existing businesses that are undertaking things such as a facade improvement or a major redevelopment in those areas. So if anybody's interested, the city does have a website that's available and has information on the funding available through those programs. If you search for community improvement plans, there should be incentives there. Staff on this call are the people that administer those programs. So if you have any follow-up questions or require details, or you have businesses that are located within those areas, we'd be more than happy to work with you on an application.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Okay, let's see our next question. It would be good if naturally developed trails were identified and if not guaranteed, at least strongly encouraged, especially for kids. Kids get locked into the suburbs when trails get wiped out. I think that's more of a comment than a question. So we're going to include that. Thanks, Steve. We appreciate that. Let's see, question. Will development near me affect my water pressure? Who has that one?
Sure. I can take a start at that one. So the addition of new houses does not significantly alter water pressure in the city's water main system and forms part of the consideration of technical staff when they're reviewing a proposed development. So generally speaking, when it's the addition of 1 or 2 units, it's anticipated that there's less pressure. When a development that is more substantial, multi-unit development, technical staff does undertake modeling to review to determine whether or not there's sufficient pressures and capacities within the sewer system before they would approve an application, and determine whether or not there would need to be improvements to the system in order to accommodate the development. And we do that to ensure that there is no impact on water pressure to the existing development in the area. Often development of subdivisions includes looping of the water main network and can actually improve the conditions of the existing network.
Right, thanks, Melissa. How are these large project infrastructure projects like water main replacements being funded? Will my taxes go up? Who gets that one?
It's another infrastructure or water wastewater question, so I'll take a start at that one. So the construction of new mains or upgrades to the existing mains required for development are generally they're paid for the developer. In certain instances, there may be cost sharing between the city and the developer if certain criteria are met. So instances where a cost sharing agreement might be appropriate is where the development not only benefits the new development that's proposed by the developer, but also has a broader broader benefit to the existing residents in the area. For example, the replacement or upgrading of a water main that's not connected to development is considered part of the budgetary process and is approved by council. But often, so there's generally speaking, it would be often I would say it's a cost sharing situation where it's shared by the new development, and where there is benefit to adjacent existing development, it would be partially funded by the city. But generally the burden is not placed on the individual taxpayers.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Actually, I have another one for you. I think it's another water wastewater question. Why is the water wastewater master plan part of the official plan?
Sure. So one of the key goals of the official plan is to coordinate development so that it's efficient, sustainable, and cost effective. So we look to ensure that services, including water and wastewater, can be extended and maintained, not impact existing services. So one of the things is ensuring that we have sufficient allocation. So I'd mentioned earlier in earlier slides that we're taking a closer review in ensuring that we are, for example, not over approving subdivisions and ensuring that we have sufficient reserve water and sewer capacity to accommodate any new development that is approved. So really it's a critical piece in the city's consideration of approving new development within the city.
Great, thanks, Melissa. I have a really good question here. How does the official plan support economic development? Who wants to take that one?
I could take a first stab at it, and just following up on what Melissa was saying, right? Making sure that our water and sewer services are in the right locations, and to ensure that we do have services in different areas. So it's part of that, making sure that there's sufficient land to support that business growth, the new businesses. But we also took a look at things like the from the ground up community economic development strategy. We took recommendations from that. So very much how the official plan is set up in the intro. You'll see if you're reading through with the red line changes, you'll see some changes around that. And earlier, as part of phase one, we had brought in things like the downtown master plan recommendations. And beyond that, I would say, I believe, who was it, Bailey or Melissa was talking about community improvement plans. So that official plan provides the framework for how we do community improvement plans, the subject matters for community improvement plans. And then, yeah, we take our cues from that official plan as we're developing those. So, yeah, so in many ways, the official plan helps with economic development.
Great, thanks, Ed. Here's a sort of a follow-up. If the official plan supports economic growth, why are there restrictions on where businesses can be located?
So this, I think, touches on a lot of things that we've been talking about tonight. One of the principal things is land use compatibility. So making sure that, you know, residential areas aren't encroaching on kind of heavy industrial areas and vice versa, right? Protecting, especially from noise, dust, vibration. The other thing too, we were talking about with transportation. So making sure that, you know, if you're locating a business on an arterial, it's different than if you're locating it on a local street. So we're looking at systematic impacts, but we're also looking at very specific parcel to parcel impact, which is why you'd have your corner store. You'd allow a corner store in a residential neighborhood, but perhaps not a kind of a manufacturing you know, building or a lumber yard or whatever it is. So public health and safety is paramount, and that's why we would have those policies. Also, as Melissa was mentioning, just the idea of kind of water capacity, sewage capacity, so that plays into that as well. So many factors.
Great, that's a very good answer. Thank you for that, very informative. I seem to be out of questions. There were some really great ones tonight, so I'm really happy, and I'm really glad that everybody's here and participating and has some really intelligent and well thought out questions. We certainly appreciate that, and we appreciate you coming. If there are any more questions, please use the live or the Q&A button at the top of your screen. You'll be able to use the right-hand side of your screen to pose your question. You can do so anonymously, or you can add your name if you would like. And I think, unless I get some more questions, why don't we do a bit of a wrap-up? Who would like to do a little bit of a wrap-up and close it out? I think we're coming to an end. Anybody? Like to put you on the spot? any one of you, if you would like to do a wrap up, I could do it if you would like to. I would just gonna say this would be a good time to just remind everybody that you can leave your comments and questions. We will answer them on the Over to You website. You have until June 3rd before we start to compile the information that you're giving us in order to create our report for council. But there will be many more opportunities for you to participate. Just so you know, this isn't your only time. We will be doing more input sessions for the public. We have another one tomorrow, so you are welcome to join again if you think of a question sometime between now and then. Excuse me, I believe it's around, is it at 2 or 3 tomorrow? Does anybody remember?
2
o'clock tomorrow.
To 3 p.m.
So the information is on the Over to You website. It's also on our social media sites where you can also get a hold of us with any questions or comments. We really appreciate your feedback. If I am missing anything from our 3 planners or Stephen Monet, please let me know.
I just really want to highlight that these initial sessions are really meant to familiarize the public with the documents that are there, how to navigate through Over to You, how to find certain documents as well. You could comment once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 12 times. So really, this initial round is to familiarize yourself. And this, just to kind of recap what Kelly was saying, this initial round will, June 3rd, but there will be other opportunities. So we are there, we are listening, and we look forward to this ongoing conversation.
I do have one last comment, of course. Now that we've done the wrap up, how might the road salt issue at Ramsey Lake be better addressed in the official plan? Is there room for the? Sorry, I'm unfamiliar with the inclusion of something like that, so maybe somebody can give us an overview of what that might look like.
I could start very, very generally as part of, and maybe others will want to jump in. The city, Bailey was mentioning earlier, provincial plans. Well, we do have a source water protection plan, which is a provincial plan, which we've incorporated as part of phase 1. So that source protection plan establishes things like intake protection zones and wellhead protection areas. And from there are prescribed threats. Prescribed, I forget which legislation, but there's a series of threats that are prescribed that says that you need to consider these or outright ban these land uses and activities. So that framework is already within the official plan. There is a review that happens with our friends at Conservation Sudbury. There's risk management officials, and I understand there's the Lake Ramsey subwatershed study that has just been completed. I'm not as familiar as perhaps some of my colleagues are, but those considerations too will be brought into the official plan. So before anybody else jumps in, know that there's a framework in place. It's been in place since I want to say 2016, 2017, and where those risks are assessed. And if anybody else wants to add something.
Only to share at the legislation I think you're referencing is the Clean Water Act.
Excellent. Thank you, Bailey.
Great. Thank you both for that one. And I have, I almost ended the entire meeting on us before I have one more question left. Okay. How can we prioritize building and rebuilding existing areas and incentives for multi-residential? How are we compensating for the reduced demand in commercial uses? Who would like to try that one?
So I can start, I suppose, with the prioritizing rebuilding and incentives for multi-residential use. So we, over the past number of years, the City of Greater Sudbury has undertaken a number of initiatives under the umbrella of our affordable housing strategy. The key program under that is our affordable housing CIP, which focuses on the development of affordable housing and provides incentives for per door grant for the creation of new residential units, a TEAG program, which sort of offsets the increase in your tax rate based on the increased assessment from the new, as a result of the new development. And That CIP is really focused on affordable housing, but we do have programs in our other CIPs, so the downtown CIP as well as the town center CIP, which encourage things through programs such as a multi-residential interest-free loan, the same per door grant program that's also available through our affordable housing CIP. So we do have a number of programs. Again, those are the downtown CIP and the town center CIP are more geographically targeted at certain areas within the city. We do have other incentive programs. So for example, there were recent amendments to our development charges bylaw. So along our major nodes and corridors within the city, there are incentives. So if we are within 100 meters of a node or sorry, a corridor or within a node, there's up to a 50% reduction in development charges within that area. So housing is a topic of interest for the city. So there's a number of initiatives or things that have happened, and then there are another set of action items that are currently underway. So I would say stay tuned. The city does have an affordable housing strategy website. So there's a lot of information, including staff reports on work that we've undertaken to date that is available. And again, we're always open. If you have very specific questions about incentives, then feel free to contact us as well.
Great, thanks, Melissa. So I think that comes, that brings us to the end.
Follow up if you wanted.
I think Ed and I just wanted to add something.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yes, absolutely.
Me first? Or you?
You first.
Okay,
then.
yeah, so just wanted to, yes, I was going to touch on the DC stuff that Melissa was talking about. We also have kind of exemptions, credits, right? So if you're rebuilding, there's actually development charge credits that you can have. But these development charge areas, these exemption areas, these community improvement plan areas are not just kind of anywhere in the community. So these are strategic locations where we already have hard services, so i.e. water and sewer. And we also have our soft services. So we already have library coverage, we already have ambulance, police coverage. So all that to say, intensification, densification, building where people are already living, that kind of as a whole saves the city money and is more coordinated and more efficient and cost effective. All those wonderful things that council has set as priorities.
And the item I wanted to add was specifically to address the idea of a sway from the need for commercial to perhaps, a higher need for residential and a lower need for commercial. And I wanted to add that our existing zoning bylaw in a number of built up areas, nodes and corridors are already zoned or have the ability to be zoned to permit a multitude of uses, including compatible residential and commercial uses. So there are a number of properties that could permit commercial uses that could just as easily be developed for residential uses without a huge burden of municipal process. So certainly there is the flexibility that already exists to allow for a developer to change and adapt to the market needs as well. So for policy all the way down to implementation, certainly it's an important issue that staff are have already put in place certain measures and are actively working towards.
Okay, I don't want to interrupt anybody. Is that, are we all good now? We're good? Okay, perfect. So that is going to conclude this session for today. So thank you again, everybody, for coming. And we look forward to your questions and comments over to you.greatersudbury.ca. Have a good night.